knowing what the information is and being able to express it in a relatively positive way, not pointing at someone and saying, "You idiot, what are you doing?" It's, well, let's talk about this and let's see what these things really mean and what are we really chasing here. This is before I was thrown off our hospital's quality improvement committee, and you'll understand why in just a moment.
Welcome to the Neurosurgery Podcast. I'm Mike Wang, and I'm here with my co-host, JP Kolcun. We are here to discuss all things neurosurgical.
Hi, this is JP Kolcun, a resident in neurosurgery at Rush University. Please note that this is not a CME event, and the opinions and statements made in this podcast do not reflect those of any institution or professional organization. Now, let's get started.
We're live.
So today's guest is Dan Resnick. I'm really happy to have Dan on because in some ways I feel like Dan's been my big brother inside of neurosurgery. And Dan, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Oh, it's my pleasure to be here, Mike.
So just by way of introduction, Dan is an amazing spine surgeon. He's had just about every major leadership role. He was the chair of the spine section of the AANS and CNS. He's been president of the CNS, and he's been president of NAS. So those are the major spine organizations in North America, barring AANS, which we're very involved in now. So thanks for being here. So the question or topic for today, I think, is one that's very sensitive if you live inside of any health system, which is this issue of patient evaluations or ratings or surveys, and we put it under the rubric of like Press Ganey or Leapfrog, right?
Yeah, you're talking about patient satisfaction scores.
Correct.
Is what you're talking about. And these have emerged over the last 10 or 15 years as part of the push towards trying to identify quality and value in medicine. The idea that if you provide a service, there should be some sort of measurable difference, and this difference divided by cost will be your value equation. The problem with these measures, there are numerous problems with these measures. The main problem is they really don't measure a lot of things that we can control as caregivers or physicians. There's been a ton of research demonstrating that really these things are much more determined by what the patient brings to the table than anything that we do. For example, the group at the Cleveland Clinic has published a series of papers, not just one, but probably 3, 4, or 5 papers looking at their patient satisfaction data and just correlating that data with patient demographics. So, for example, if a patient has irritable bowel syndrome or has another autoimmune disease, the odds are that their patient satisfaction scores are going to be much lower than the mean. If a patient has more than 4 allergies, or let's say, if a patient reports more than 4 allergies, their patient satisfaction scores are going to be lower than if the patient doesn't.
Dan, give us an idea. Like, not everybody's filled these out. Like, give me an example of a kind of question that a patient would actually be asked.
Well, these questions are: were you satisfied with the interaction? Did the provider provide you a chance to provide input to your care? Did the provider care about your disorder? And the one that was really the big bugaboo, especially given the opioid crisis, is that up until very, very recently, in both the inpatient and outpatient measures, there was a specific question as to whether or not the physician adequately cared for your pain.
I see.
So this was an exact incentive to drive the prescribing of opioids to chronic pain patients
During the crisis.
This helped create the crisis.
Yeah.
This crisis was aided and abetted by the federal government through these patient satisfaction measure programs.
And who runs this? Is this a company that runs it, or do I give my patient my survey myself? Like, who's actually driving this?
So the way this works is that your hospital, your health system, or your practice will hire a company to do this. And what they will do is they send out surveys to your patients after their visit with you and ask them these types of questions. The problem with these questions is that they've been they've become sort of the substitute for true quality in medicine, and they've been proven on numerous occasions in spine surgery, in general surgery, in emergency medicine, in internal medicine, in pediatrics, in geriatrics, and in psychiatry to have absolutely nothing to do with actual medical outcomes. So if you follow patient-reported outcomes such as pain scores after spine surgery, for example, and we operate on pain for 90% of what we do, right?
Right.
There's no correlation between patient satisfaction and recovery from pain. There's no correlation between.
Is that right?
Yes. Yeah.
So
Matt McGirt wrote that up about probably 12 years ago now.
So your leg pain can be completely resolved with surgery, and the patient's not satisfied.
Exactly.
That's what I felt too. Like it happens.
Oh no! It's been shown. It's not.
I'm not crazy.
It's not just an anecdotal report. I mean, there's actual data behind this. Erica Besson in Utah also had a very similar report looking at the results of patient satisfaction measures being less favorable if the physician didn't recommend surgery. So we're being incentivized to recommend surgery.
We like that, right?
But we're being incentivized to do invasive things, and we're being incentivized to prescribe narcotics in order to chase these scores, which have nothing to do with medical outcomes.
So how do you navigate your practice when you go to work knowing that these metrics to which you're being held as a standard are meaningless?
Well, so I'm going to put on my old guy who's been around the block hat, and I ignore these things because they are meaningless, and they're shown to be meaningless. However, the problem is there are numerous examples where physician reimbursement or privileges in the OR or credentials are related to these patient satisfaction measures. I give a talk on this thing, and so I just explained how there's no correlation between actual medical outcomes and patient satisfaction scores. We just talked about how there's a perverse incentive that if you're chasing these things, you're going to end up doing bad things. You're going to do more expensive things, i.e. tend to offer more surgery, and do more dangerous things, i.e. offer more opiates. These are also highly manipulable. If you look in any of the trade journals, you can look at Becker's, you can for spine, you can look at the nursing journals. Just go on the internet and punch in patient satisfaction scores. You will find a slew of articles, anywhere from the Ladies' Home Journal to the AORN to whatever, showing different ways to improve your patient satisfaction scores. I have a slide where I've got 8 ways, and then 7 ways, and 6 ways, and 5 ways, and 4 ways, and then the last one is all you have to do is bring your heart to work. And usually at that point people are vomiting, in the audience because it's just so absurd. The other thing is the point that this is patient dependent. We use a company called Avatar, which is very similar to Press Ganey. It's just a different company, but it has the same sorts of questions. And we looked at our Avatar. The way our Avatar scores are reported is in a dashboard. And so if you are if you're doing a good job with your Avatar scores, you get a green box. And then if you're doing an okay job, you get sort of the yellow circle.
Just to make it simpler, because we're too stupid.
We're way too stupid
look
to
at
actually understand numbers. Well,
Yeah.
I'll explain those numbers in just a minute too.
Okay.
And then if you're doing poorly, you get a red triangle. Okay. So first off, if you look at our entire department, there's 18 of us. Of the 18 of us, 13 of us are all green squares straight across. There's 5 of us who are solid red triangles. Okay. Those are the 5 of us are the ones who take care of spine patients. Okay, The vascular guys, we just cured you of a time bomb in your head. The tumor guys, they're saving lives.
Right.
Peds, that's a whole other world. All the spine guys, everybody who treats pain is in red, and it's the same thing in orthopedics. If you compare the sports guys to the spine guys look great. The spine guys look terrible. The rehab guys look awful.
Yeah.
Even
There's somebody worse than us?
Oh yeah.
Wow.
Believe it or not.
Oh,
Same thing. What was the other? So that was ortho and us. Rehab was the other department I looked at our place. The other thing is it totally depends on your patient population. So I run 2 clinics. One's on a Thursday and one's on a Friday. And so I got my Avatar scores from both my clinics. They were both looking at the same guy. I'm the same guy. Same clinics, right? They're right next door to each other, but they're basically in the same place. Same basic patient population, right? I'm treating all spine patients. In one clinic, I was solid green boxes. I had a 95.8% approval rating, or would you recommend this physician to come back to rating from my patients. On the next day, at the exact same clinic, I had a 69% rating or a glowing red triangle with evil horns and
How do you
smoke
explain?
coming
Are
out
you
of it.
in a bad mood on Fridays? Like, how do you explain that?
Well, as it turns out, that's almost 30-point difference, right?
Right, that's
and,
huge.
And if you think that, if a standard deviation in a score that's reported, in that metric is going to be 5 points, that means I'm 6 standard deviations away from myself. Right? And Mike has a degree in epidemiology. He knows math, and so Mike, if I'm 6 standard deviations away from myself, can I in fact exist?
I'm thinking maybe it's your nurse practitioner or something. Is it a different?
No, so then look at the comments you get. Usually it's one patient who submarines you. And you get comments like, "Oh, I wish they had hot chocolate in the coffee maker," or I had a lot of trouble getting in from the parking lot,
Pinnacle of care.
or the line was too long where I had to register. I mean, stuff that you have no control over whatsoever.
To me, I feel like this whole thing is a gambit. Like, okay, let's take a little bit more extreme scenario. The online reviews, right? Google, Vitals, RateMDs, all that. Like, to me, just like any other system, these companies that do this, if they don't have negative reviews, they don't have a purpose. It's like the IRS, right? The IRS has to have people cheating on taxes, or why even have an IRS except to take the money in, right? And so they need to have, Press Ganey needs to have bad scores, otherwise there would be no purpose for them, right?
Well, Press Ganey is a little bit different.
Okay.
Because I talked about those numbers that they give you,
Right.
and our hospital is always chasing the numbers. They always have I don't know if your hospital does this.
Oh
too,
my God, they're
but
chasing, yeah.
But they always have their goal and their
Yeah.
baseline and where you are down here, type stuff, just to make you feel like crap when you're looking at these things. When we were looking at one of these metrics, this is before I was thrown off our hospital's quality improvement committee, and you'll understand why in just a moment. but we were chasing a hospital satisfaction score where the national mean was like 80.4%, and we were at 79.9%. But there was such clustering; we were in the 10th percentile because everyone is clustered right around there.
Right.
So we were investing like hundreds of thousands of dollars in this marketing campaign to boost our ratings in this. I forgot what the measure was, but it was to try to get a better rating, in the whatever health grades, WebMD, whatever it was.
Yeah.
To raise the bar from 79.9 to 80.4, we were spending all this money for meaningless, absolutely meaningless. So I expressed my frustration with this and was asked to not be on the committee anymore, among other things.
I mean, to some degree, this is reassuring. In other words, it's depressing because here you are. You're a national leader. You're well known throughout the world. You've been the titular leader, the principal leader of so many organizations. You're an excellent surgeon. Your pedigree is flawless. You're very personable. I know how conservative you are. You are not doing anything crazy. You're in an environment where the patients are pretty normal compared to Miami.
True.
And if you're dealing with this, like, what hope is there for any spine surgeon out there except to game the system?
Well, that's the problem. We are incentivized to game the system as opposed to do what we should do, and it's difficult. It's easier for me. I'm older, been around the block. I no longer care so much about these things. If a hospital administrator wants to give me a hard time about something, I give them my talk.
Yeah.
And if they have any comment, we can discuss it. But usually when I show them the data, they go, oh, and then they walk away, type thing. We did a similar thing. They reported that the neurosurgery spine infection rate was 5 times out of orthopedics when you looked at case by case basis. Well, that's terrible. Well, let's take a look at the data. Well, it turned out that it was completely apples and oranges. They were comparing intradural tumors to microdiscectomies, and that pretty much explained all the variants. So knowing what the information is and being able to express it in a relatively positive way, not pointing at someone and saying, "You idiot, what are you doing?" It's, well, let's talk about this and let's see what these things really mean and what are we really chasing here.
So would that be your advice for more junior faculty who can't put on their old guy hat?
It's true.
But
So,
whose practices and whose salaries are being tied to these things?
right, and this is one of the I talk about this stuff all the time, as Mike knows, which is why he asked me to come and talk about this. But one of the other things I talk about is mentoring, and one of the I think biggest challenges to our profession right now is the shift from private practice to hospital employed physicians. It used to be you joined a private practice, you'd have some partners who were invested in making sure you didn't screw up. and who would protect you and would feed you appropriate cases and would bring you along most of the time. I mean, there's always bad actors, but that was generally what they did because they had built this practice that had a reputation, they had an income stream that they wanted to protect. With the hospital employed model, young neurosurgeons are being put into a situation where they're pretty much by themselves. They're given a production target, and they're held hostage by their signing bonus to some extent. And they don't have a senior neurosurgeon around who they're not competing with for those RVUs. And so they end up by themselves, and they end up chasing these things, RVUs, and also these sort of meaningless outcomes, and get themselves in trouble. You know, and get too much entrepreneurialism, not enough.
Yeah, you
not
see
enough
that,
cynicism.
right?
We do.
Because
see
you're
that.
on the American Board of Neurosurgeons. We just
Right.
had Carl Hallman here.
Uh-huh.
And so you probably see this behavior, right, play out in real life.
Yes, yeah, it is. I think it's the biggest threat. Honestly, I think that's the biggest threat to our specialty. I mean, I don't think it's you know whether or not anesthesiologists are being too aggressive with needles, or if the pulmonary guys aren't letting us do enough critical care. I think it's ourselves abandoning our young generation of neurosurgeons to a economic situation that rewards poor behavior.
Wow, that's humbling. It's a little bit scary. I thought they were just being commoditized.
Well, that's part of it. But they're commoditized, and that's why these hospital systems can get away with it because they're just a cog in the wheel. They're not they're just a cog in the machine. They're not part of the community of the hospital.
You know,
per
I
se.
got very angry recently. I was at a meeting and there was a Canadian neurosurgeon, very well known in spine, and he made some comment like, you know, don't worry, you're all replaceable. And I said, you know, actually, I disagree completely with you. I said, I know that I can be replaced, but that's not the same thing as saying I'm replaceable. Like, my wife can be replaced, but she's not replaceable. My dog, my children can be replaced. That's not the same thing as saying someone's replaceable. And I feel like there's this huge sucking sound of our souls being ripped away from the core, which is kind of what I'm hearing from you. I mean, we come at it from different angles, but right? I mean, don't you feel that too?
Well, I do. As I said, I think that's a big. I think that situation is the biggest threat, and one of the things we're working on the board is trying to figure out ways to prevent that. One of the reasons why we do this post review, where we look at the cases of the younger neurosurgeons as it goes out, is to see who's going off the rails and intervene early.
But it's purely, I don't want to say it's punitive, it's purely, I don't know, there's something missing with it. Like, how do we actually, we're not really in control of the system. You're sort of back-ending it, right? You're sort of like, and there's no, I don't know if there's any other solution. I'm not saying I have a better solution, but you're back-ending and saying, okay, we're not going to let you get away with this behavior and be board certified, for example, right?
Right.
But then you're kind of like the bad guy. It's like the policeman, right? You're like, now you're the policeman and the other guys get to give the signing bonuses.
Yeah, but I mean, you know, if you care about our specialty, if you care about, you know, where we're going and who we are, someone's got to do that job. You
Yeah.
know, and you know, if you're on the board, that's what you signed up for. I mean, that's that job. It's a very difficult job. It's probably the hardest job I've ever had in organized neurosurgery, and I love it because you really feel like you're doing something that makes a difference. You know, in terms of doing something to mediate the essentially perverse incentives that are driving poor behavior. And what's happened is the fee-for-service system has always been hammered on as being perverse incentivized, because the more you do, the more you get paid. So you're incentivized just to do more, right? And people, you know, do what they're incentivized to do. Well, we sort of switched that to make it an even worse situation with the Affordable Care Act and the coalescence of these health systems into large mega conglomerates that treat neurosurgeons as commodities as opposed to an essential part of the community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, JP, I'm curious to get your your input on this, because Dan and I are both Gen Xers, right?
I don't know.
I don't think you're a baby boomer. Yeah, I think we're Gen Xers. Technically, even though you don't act like one, you're technically a millennial.
Don't remind me.
I know. So, like, I mean, you hear this. What do you think about this? I mean, you see it. You kind of grew up in it a little bit, right? A little bit more than we did, anyways.
Well, it's just hard to imagine when you take a bunch of bright-eyed young people who all want to go into this field for the right reasons, we hope, and everyone I've met of my generation wants to go into it for the right reasons. And then you look a little bit ahead and you see this landscape where, oh, well, what can I get paid to do? What will I be allowed to do? And those are looming giants, and you're just down here with your idea of this is what I think is the right thing to do.
Well, what you need to do is do the right thing, and
Right.
and things will come around. I mean, we've always been subject to perverse incentives, and the only thing that's preserved our specialty is the fact that we've had a bunch of bright-eyed Eagle Scouts, who want to do the right thing, want to be known for doing the right thing, and have done the right thing. I mean, to a great extent. I mean, look at the history of our specialty. We've got giants who have stood against the tide, have been iconoclasts. My mentor Peter Janetta was, everyone told him he was insane for years, and it turns out he was right. When Larson and Benzel started talking about biomechanical principles and doing spinal fusions, it was hearsay when these guys started talking about that type of stuff. Turns out there was something to that.
So what can we do besides maintaining and working towards the good? What can we do actively at a systems level for the young people on the way up? How can we get involved?
So I think, this was the part of the talk I gave for the CNS about 5 or 6 years ago. I think I think mentorship is extremely important. I think identifying someone, even if it's someone from your training program who you can just touch base with for a period of time. I think feeling that you're all by yourself, feeling that you're the low man on the totem pole, or you're a cog in the machine is a bad place for a neurosurgeon to be. We are all very proud people. We're all very, high. We're ambitious. We're proud. We perform high. We want to be busy. We want to be doing stuff. It needs to be appreciated and acknowledged somehow. And if you're just feeling like a cog in the machine, that leads to burnout. Makes you cynical. Makes you think, well, I'm just going to make my hay and screw everybody else. Type of thing. So I think maintaining mentorship, being part of a community, the spine section, the WNS, the CNS. By coming to these meetings, you sit around the bar, and the talks are great. I learned a ton of the talks. I learned more at the bar, talking to colleagues about, do you believe what they're doing with the Price-Ganey scores at my place? They've now tied my income to my patient satisfaction scores, which are tied to prescribing opiates. Isn't that insane? It's like, yes, that is insane. So Mike says, so I'm not the only one. No, you're not the only one. This is happening all over the place. And those interactions are very valuable. Being part of the community is really, I think, one of the best defenses against the cynicism and burnout. That and maintaining high standards for our trainees. We are privileged. I was at one of Mike's recruiting dinners at the Delano. We can't compete with that in Wisconsin. That was amazing. But we're fortunate to have many more applicants than we have spots. So we get to pick. We do have the ability to select our trainees, and we need to continue to select trainees and use things like integrity and loyalty and trustworthiness as mainstays of our selection criteria.
Well, definitely at my stage, I'm still feeling the high standards for the trainees. But thank you so much for your time. This has been incredibly informative and inspiring.
My pleasure. Thanks a lot.